welcome to another webinar from the Ability series. Today, we'll be listening to the story of a mother by Dr. Neelam Sodhi. We'll be talking about overcoming cerebral palsy challenges, what you should know as a parent, special educator, teacher, and therapist. I'll be talking more about our speaker for the day, but before that, a quick and brief introduction about Ability. For us, as an organization, all carers of children with special needs, you are at the center of our universe. Every child wants to thrive, and every child should be given the opportunity to thrive. And our mission is just to make things easier for you all. So, when we say easier, I mean making it more accessible, making it more affordable, and making it much more effective for you all. One way we have been able to do that is through technology. But while we understand that technology could help a lot, without the caregivers, technology alone is insufficient. And that's why we bring to you a host of other support systems such as community and other resources. Because no one should have to do this alone, right? Everyone should be given the chance to enable the best possible chance of discovering their child's true potential. One way we have been making our resources reach to you is through our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do check our link in the chat box. Our team members are sharing it. There are more than hundreds of useful videos for special educator and parents and therapists to learn from. Apart from that, you can also follow our Facebook page. Thousands of people are already following it, and we are sure that if you follow the page, you will stay updated about all upcoming events from Ability and could get to learn a lot about it. So we have recently launched our brand new platform for hosting Ability webinars as well. The Ability Student Success Platform also has Ability webinars and events hosted on the platform itself. So now if you have an Ability account, you could see the list of all the upcoming events as in webinars and workshops, and also all the past webinars in the on-demand section. So you can access the recording of the past webinars from the on-demand section, and you can register for the upcoming webinars by visiting app.ability.com/events. This is how you could register through our webinar. There are certain details that you need to enter, including your first name, last name, email, contact, and how do you best describe yourself. Okay, and if you already have an account, you just need to click on the register now button and you can directly go and register for any of the webinar that you want to attend. So without further ado, let us come to our speaker for the day, Dr. Neelam Sodhi. She's the founder member and director of Ashirwad, the North India Cerebral Palsy Association. She's a gynecologist by profession. She's engaged in the work of creating possibilities for people with disabilities by the birth of our son who has cerebral palsy. She's also the past board member of the National Trust for Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Intellectual Disabilities, and Multiple Disabilities, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. She's the member of the Training Resource Group, RBSK, Ministry of Health, and also an associate faculty. Well, there is a lot that could be said about her and in her introduction, but I would not like you all to wait to hear from her. And therefore, without any further ado, I would request Dr. Neelam Sodhi to take over so that you can learn more about her and her journey directly from her.
Thank you so much, Swati, for that kind introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining in on this session. I am not a technical expert, but I am what is called an experiential expert, and an expert who has become so because of her experiences. My son has cerebral palsy, so today I'm just going to share a little bit of my life with you and what things maybe I could do to make a more possible future for him. So I've often heard people say that you are a gynecologist, so the journey must have been very easy for you. You obviously knew all the technicalities and how things were going to go. It must not have been difficult for you. And a doctor earns a lot of money. A doctor has a lot of information. So things must have been easy. Well, let me tell you, I'm just a parent like quite a few sitting out there and listening to me. I am a gynecologist, which meant that I was bringing in babies all the time into this world. And yes, when we started this journey, we also did not have too much money. So all that has been done is basically just evolving from the day we received the news. My son is born prematurely and at around 7.5 months of pregnancy. And what I really felt after his birth was that his development was not quite like I thought other children should be developing. See, I'm a gynecologist. I didn't study pediatrics actually very much in detail, but one knows that what is the normal development of a child. So what I could feel was that my son had not been sitting up by the time he was 6 months, and there was some delay. We went to doctors, and the only answers that we got was that just because he is born premature, so it will take time. Till then, he was 11 months old, and we got the diagnosis of cerebral palsy. And believe me, like they would say in Hindi to all those who can understand out here, as it was as if pairo tale zameen khisak gayi, as if the sand had just slipped from under my feet. And what was this? We weren't prepared for it. We didn't even understand the word cerebral palsy. So when the pediatrician explained that cerebral basically means that this is related to an injury to the brain, which can occur before, during, or after birth. And palsy is weakness in the way this child is going to move or position or balance his body. And all those who have worked with children with cerebral palsy, the therapist, the parents, or any educator knows that it affects every individual differently. So if you have even 2 people with this diagnosis of cerebral palsy, their manifestations would probably be very much different from each other. What we were told in very simple terms was that there is an active mind in a disobedient body. And to me, that sort of summarized just about everything. I think probably the reason why I was able to do what I could do with my child was that I held on to this, that the mind is active, the brain is agile, but the body cannot obey the commands of the brain. So what happens to the intelligence? Yes, we all know that physically the body is affected, but what about the intelligence? Not all children with cerebral palsy have a low intelligence quotient, or the intellect is not affected. In fact, there are a lot of children who have cerebral palsy with normal or even higher intellect. So how does the intellect come to be affected? It could be because there has been a damage to the brain, that part of the brain which is responsible for cognition, for learning. But it also could be that because of cerebral palsy, because the child is not able to move, his learning through his environment is affected, and that is why the intellect is affected. I'll talk about this more later as we go on. So once we had received the diagnosis, what next? Well, I realized that there was no need to sit and hook up, no need to mull over the diagnosis. Now it's done, it's happened. So what next? What could I do? The place where we lived in did not have any services of any sort for children with cerebral palsy. So I became my child's therapist. And I remember I used to go to my hometown in a state very far from where I live now in Punjab. And I used to make regular visits after every 3 months or after every 6 months. I used to go and get a home management program. And what did this home management program include? It enabled me, it made me realize that I needed to stimulate the brain of my child. This was the only thing that I was focusing on, that my child's brain had to be stimulated. Of course, everything comes simultaneously. So there I was, his therapist. We were crawling together. We were sidewalking together. We were climbing upstairs together. When I was giving him his meals, that was the time when I was speaking poems to him. I was telling him stories, and I was teaching him paper tearing and paper sticking, and holding the big thick brush, the shaving brush, for him to paint so that his fine motor functions could develop. So So I became my son's therapist. I got those home management programs. But I also remember one thing, that if my therapist gave me one thing to work with, I used to put my brain to apply it to come up with 10 different ideas to work on the same thing. What are the concerns that are related to having cerebral palsy? We all know that the mobility can be affected, the speech can be affected, vision and hearing sometimes is affected. But for a person to be able to live in the society, which is ultimately the goal of any individual, ultimately the track of any individual's life from birth to adulthood, is that you go to school, you learn, you go to school, you become independent in activities of daily living, you make friends. And then when you grow up, you have a career, you start earning, you have economic independence, and maybe at some stage of life, you get married and have children also. So don't these things, the natural span of life, don't they apply to children with cerebral palsy also? Yes, they do. But normal, typical development happening is sometimes just something, it just happens. But for a child with cerebral palsy, all these steps of development, all these steps of the spans of life may take a far more time to achieve. And everything then becomes huge. Everything becomes a concern. Learning, that's a challenge. Going to school is a challenge. Teaching activities of daily living, wearing clothes by themselves, eating by themselves, all this becomes a big challenge. Before I go further, I want to share some things that I have learned in my journey. And probably these were the things which helped me maximum. What I was told, like I said right at the start, is that cerebral palsy is an active or agile brain in a disobedient body. And what I was also told, that the maximum brain development happens in the first 5 to 6 years. So I took that as my mantra. I took that as my goal, that in the next 5 to 6 years, I'm going to give him the best start in life. So how does brain develop? There is a beautiful research going on by the Harvard University, where they have the Center on the Developing Child. And there are these 3 themes, these 3 core concepts, which they have come out with in early development, that experiences build brain architecture. So what are these experiences gained from? Children learn through exploring, through putting things in their mouth, through listening, seeing, feeling, having a tactile sensation, through interaction and through experimenting. How do they gain these experiences? Once the child can balance his head, and then the child starts looking around. Once they sit, they start reaching out to things. Something falls on the ground, you give that child that ball back, and the child starts laughing and realizes that if I drop this, somebody is going to bring it back, and it's going to be a game. And that is how the child learns. That is how through serve and return interaction, brain circuits are formed. But toxic stress derails this healthy development. And this toxic stress, in the case of our children with cerebral palsy, is huge, because the brain has been damaged before, during, or after birth, leaving some parts of the brain totally paralyzed. And whatever part of the brain is affected, that part of the brain is not going to function. But that does not mean that these circuits cannot develop. That does not mean that learning cannot happen. It's just that with a child with cerebral palsy, instead of the child going to the environment, you bring the environment to the child so that the child can explore, mouth, listen, see, feel, touch, interact, and experiment. And how do people learn? This is not something that I'm saying of only in childhood. How do we all learn throughout our life? We learn through experience from being a child to later on in life. We also learn through failures and making mistakes. We learn through falling down and then again getting up. But with our children with cerebral palsy, one thing is that they may not necessarily get a chance to learn through their experience, because they may not necessarily have a chance to have that experience. We do not even allow them to fail or make mistakes. And that was something which I was doing till my child was 7 years old. I was feeding him, I was dressing him, I was bathing him, till I realized that if he had to get independent, then he had to learn on his own. He would make mistakes. It was my job to see how I could easen out things for him to learn. He might fall, he might fail, he might fall, he might traumatize himself, he might get his knees might get scratched, his hands might get scratched, but never mind. He learned from that, and the next time he positioned himself better so that he did not make that mistake. So 2.5 years later, schooling had to be started, because in our country, in India, we generally put children in preschool around 2.5 years. So when we put him into school, by the age of 2.5 years, my son already knew all the alphabets. He knew counting numbers till 10. He knew about 10 poems. And how did he know all that? Because he had a mother who was so obsessive with giving him experiences that all his free time, all the time that I used to spend with him was teaching, teaching, teaching. And remember, this was not teaching in the sense of teaching. It was play, it was enjoyment, but it was teaching, and for him, it was learning. So when we put him in school, that was the first time we were told he cannot hold a pencil and he cannot draw a circle. And that was the first time it struck us, will education be even possible for him? When we put him into mainstream school, the first day the teacher looked at him and said, please take this child out of school. He is mentally retarded. I cannot teach him. And there I was crying and telling the teacher, please give him an opportunity. Wait for 2 days. You'll know that he knows how much he knows. Believe me, 2 days later, that first day that I stood up for my son, because I believed in the abilities of my son, the first day I stood up paid off, because 2 days later, the teacher told me, this boy is going to be a doctor, Dr. Sodhi. Mark my words, he's going to go far. So the assumptions that anybody makes, you know, we presume incompetence. I've had to face that. My son has to face that endlessly. Because of his vision, we used to have a large print for everything. Climbing up the stairs to school, so the classroom had to be brought to the ground floor rather than when all children go to a higher floor, the class was brought to the ground floor. Teaching was all practical. I used to make everything concrete, teach on concrete, then go to pictorial, and then get to the abstract. Well, I'm a gynecologist, but I'm also a housewife. I'm a homemaker. I have my responsibilities in the home also. So there I was juggling my duties in the home, at the job. And remember, I think if you know any obstetrician, you know that the babies can come at any time of the day and night. They don't just wait for you to be free before they do it. So there would be one, I would be in the kitchen, I would be attending a call, I would be working with my child, getting him to sit and do some lessons. And there it was, juggling everything. Education of my child was another challenge, because I am a doctor. I was not trained to be a teacher. I did not know how to teach phonics. I did not know how to teach maths in the simplest way form. So I had to learn it. So the pictures that you can see at the bottom are these which I still have from some things that I learned. I used to go to schools, attend teacher training workshops, inveigle my way, go and talk to people, say, please, please let me do it. And I have done it all. And I was his teacher till class 10. Losing self-esteem was, I felt I was a nobody. Despite the fact that I was very good at my work, my patients simply loved me. And I was making so much of a headway with my child. But probably the whole stress of it, the stress of the whole world around me was so much, my self-esteem had totally shattered. And I want to share how I got it back. I started doing adolescent education programs in schools, talking to little girls, young girls, connected me with that, gave me an opportunity to do something very different from the world that I was living in, got the appreciation. People saying that you are good was a salve to my heart. I was a good person. I healed, I became better. Changing mindsets is something I have been doing since the time that my son was born. I remember standing on the street one day. I used to drive a scooter. My son was sitting on the back seat, and a woman passing by just stopped and said, "Is your son like this right from birth?" And this was when he was 5 to 6 years old. I had been facing this question from strangers, from relatives, from well-meaning friends. And that was the day I decided to stand up and say, yes, he is. Is that of any concern to you? I think you could mind your own business. And since that time, I have told people to mind their business while I went around minding mine, which was taking care of my child and opening doors. Probably my biggest strength has been that I believed in my child and I knew that he could do it. I knew what all he could do, and the word not possible doesn't exist in my dictionary for just about anything. And probably that has been my strength. So when I know that something is not working out, I will stop banging on that door. I will change tactics and find out some way that works. Because I knew inside of me that this is not good enough. There is always something more that my son could do, that I could do to make possibilities for him. One thing that I have learned as a faculty member at Keystone Human Services is that there is nothing like a neutral perception. The moment I opened my mouth on the screen, the moment you saw me on the screen, you probably all made a judgment of how the session would go. Just looking at me, maybe you made a positive judgment, maybe you made a negative judgment. So there's nothing like a neutral perception. Why does this happen? Because we are all filled with unconscious biases. And what are these unconscious biases? These are the perceptions, the attitudes, the beliefs, the values that we have grown up with since the time we were child, and things which we have lived with, things that are there in our environment. And that is the iceberg. That is the unconsciousness which shapes what we do, our behaviors, our practices, our decisions. And so we can make these unconscious biases are negative assumptions. But when we make a negative assumption about a child, like say, even when my child was small, and I would want him to say, bring a glass of water from the kitchen sometime if I'm working, and I would say, okay, just get yourself a glass of water. I was always scared he would drop it. And maybe I did say that to him also at some time. But then what was I doing? I was devaluing my child because of that unconscious bias that I had, that because he has cerebral palsy, because his hand functions are not good, that is why he will not be able to carry it. He will drop it. So we probably all operate on that. But I feel that all these negative assumptions are actually a devaluation. But on the other side, there are the positive assumptions about human nature and development. And that is that every individual, you, me, anyone else, we all thrive on challenges. And if we are set a goal or a deadline or a target, don't we all come up to it? That is the positive assumption probably that I unconsciously continued in my life to adopt. Like I said, I believe in my child. So much so that after the board exams of class 10, because by class 9, he had to take a writer. And by the board exams of class 10, which he wrote with the writer, he said, I want to be a computer engineer. We believe in our child, in our son so much that we did not ridicule, we did not say, no, not possible. The principal threw him out of school because he said a person with cerebral palsy, with a vision problem, and who takes a writer for an exam cannot become an engineer. But we believed, I would not even say stood by. As a parent, that is what you're going to be doing, aren't you? So we believed, and so we just did what was necessary for us as parents to do to get him to achieve that dream of yours. And in fact, what our son really taught us was that it is okay to do what your heart desires. And there are always ways to get to where you are going to need. My father often enough used to tell me, you push your son too hard. But then there is only a fine line between pushing too hard and not having any expectations at all. How did I survive all that? I remember there was a time when I was almost on the point of breakdown. But like I said, I am a fighter, I believe. I always know something is possible. So somewhere my unconsciousness told me that I needed to fight. So even when my consciousness was actually giving up, my unconsciousness was telling me to fight it out. I did Reiki. I'm a 3rd degree healer master in Reiki, and it really calmed me. It helped me change my life, bring around the positive so much in my life. And Reiki also helped, I think it contributed to the functional improvement that my son has in his vision today. At that time also, we opened Ashirvad. Ashirvad is my NGO. We initially started working for children with cerebral palsy, but now 21 years later, we are working with children and adults with autism, intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy and multiple disabilities. And when we started Ashirvad, I think the first task that we undertook was to change mindsets. So we worked with doctors, seeing that that the children were given a diagnosis as early as possible, so that early intervention, which is something which I so strongly believe in, becomes possible for so many more children. And we worked with doctors, we worked with schools, because finally it is schools who are going to admit the child. My son has had the benefits of an early intervention as well as mainstream schooling. And that is what I want for any child who comes in contact with me. I would neglect my meals, I would neglect my health, but that is not something I'm going to advise any of the parents to do. So my husband forced me into starting eating breakfast, and believe me, it works. Because if you take care of your diet and if you take care of your body, which is the temple, you're going to be able to do so much more. And I had a wonderful circle of friends because I was constantly crying. I remember till he got admission to his to +1 high school. Till that time, I used to keep crying. I do not know why I was crying. Maybe because of the hugeness of it all. Maybe because I had to fight society all the time. Maybe because I just didn't have the strength to make the changes. But today, all that has paid off. My son has done his master's in software engineering from IIIT Allahabad, which is a premier institute of India. And today, he is enjoying all the perks, the skills, the responsibilities, and the beautiful career possibilities of a software developer. He lives independently in Bangalore, taking care of his life just like anyone else would do, including the cleaning and the shopping and the commuting and the finances. So truly living an independent life. His personal growth is a very strong example of using the culturally valued analog. The culturally valued analog means doing things the typical way, doing things the way everybody else does, not doing them in a different manner. And his life is also a very strong example of role performance and circularity. He studied, he built up his skills, he had a competency enhancement, he built up his skills, he became an engineer. As an engineer, the expectations were that he could study further or go into a job. He studied further, and once he studied, he got his master's. Then the expectation was that he would get a job, and he got a job in a multinational where he has been working. So the expectations led to role performance, his performance as a team member, his performance as a software developer created even more expectations. And that is how now his performance is so good that although he has changed his company, he has become an invaluable member of this second company also. Talking about Ashirvad, I would just like to take a pause here to say something which I missed out when I say I believe. I believe in God. I believe in the supreme power up there somewhere who's taking care of all of us. This was not there right from the start. It happened only somewhere down my journey where I realized that you need to make all your efforts, but you also need to have faith that at some time things are going to turn. The examination of your life is going to end. The challenges of your life will be overcome. You need to continue taking those tiny, tiny steps forward. But there is someone up there who knows when is the correct time to actually be giving you the fruits of all those tiny steps that you're doing. And this big fruit of my life is Ashirvad, the North India Cerebral Palsy Association. I'm a founder, member, and director along with 9 others. Today, like you can see, we have 3 verticals. We do early intervention, all motivated because of what my son got through his early intervention. We do open schooling for children who are unable to school, because when my son went to school, I realized that education was so important for everybody. It gave you your self-esteem. It gave you confidence. It gave you the power to tell people in society, I am a student. I'm training for this. And after that, the third vertical that we have is skill training or vocational training for all those who are still continuing to be with us, who do not want to leave us for whatever reason. We are trying to find ways to help them out in such a way that they become independent. We are not holding hands. We do not have a sheltered workshop. So although they work part-time for some time in Ashirvad, they also tend to work outside in society. My advice to caregivers and professionals, your child is not abnormal. Don't use that word. The child is not the diagnosis. The child is what you can see in front of your eyes, all the capabilities that he has, all that your child can show you what he can do. And that therapy is not necessarily occupational speech, physiotherapy. Therapy is also play. And apart from therapy, it is very important to teach the child how to make friends, how to interact with people in society, because your aim is that ultimately your child, when he is grown up, is going to be an independent member of society, contributing to society. And that is the time when he is going to have his own battles to fight. You cannot be his support system all the time. He has to create a support system equivalent to his age. Maybe find a partner also. And that is all going to happen if this foundation is there in life, where the child goes beyond therapy and learns how to actually live with other members of society. My advice to professionals is to please have belief. And every student can learn. You just want to know, have to know how to teach that individual. My son took probably a week to learn how to write the alphabet A. My daughter did it in one day, but that does not mean that there is any difference in his achievements. He is a software developer, even if he took 1 week to learn to write the letter A. My advice to professionals also is to look at the child holistically. I often hear, let's first take care of the mobility. Then we can see what to do about the vision. Let's first take care of vision. Then we can see what to do about learning. And then precious time is lost. I've also seen parents come frustrated back from doctors who say, okay, first let the child start walking, then we'll see whether he can hear or not. Development does not happen in individual domains. All domains develop together and they support the development of the other domains. So if the child's vision is impaired, then that child's learning, that child's mobility, that child's communication, all that is going to get impaired. Time is precious. Your plans should be such, the IEPs that you make, the plans should be such that the maximum is achieved in the minimal time that is required. And this is possible only through partnership with parents, because the child is with you only for a little part of the day, but the child is with the home, in the home, with the parents, with the family for maximal part of the day. And that is the time where maximal learning is going to happen. So a partnership is going to help you get better results. It's going to help you get more fame. Your name is going to be more developed and you are going to get credit. Like I already related my story about presuming incompetence, and it has been so many times. Another story that I can share is that when he went into class 6, the teacher there said, you cannot learn maths. Tell your mother to teach you what is required sufficiently enough to answer your exams. And she refused to teach him maths in class. And it is this very same boy who in class 6 was told this by this teacher, who got 90% marks in maths in class 10, writing with the writer. So please do not presume incompetence. Parents, you're going to have a lifetime of fighting. So be prepared to run that hurdle race. Be mentally and physically prepared to fight those physical barriers and the attitudinal barriers. We had to do it even in our son's workplace. Don't keep it all bottled out. You want to cry? Have a good cry. Become fresh for the next day, for the next moment. You're angry? Vent it out. You want to break a glass? Go ahead and do it. Take a steel glass and throw it. Vent it out. Find your own method of doing it. Bottling it all inside is just going to create more self-pity for you, and you are going to drown in that self-pity. Believe it. This is coming from a parent who has done it all and then learned that nothing of this really worked. What worked is just to keep a calm mind. If you cannot find a way this way, then turn and find a way the other way. Persevere, 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 and create a support system. If you need house help, please see if you can get that. You need somebody to look after your child while you go shopping. You need somebody to help your child's learning. You need somebody to take care of errands that you need to run outside the house. Create a support system, and that is what is going to help you. But don't neglect yourself. Do have me time, that 10 or 15 minutes in the day where you can just be listening to music. And it's not being selfish, honestly, it's not being selfish. You have a right to take care of yourself just because your parents, mother, father. See, therapists are beautiful people. Therapists are in that job because they love doing it. Like, I'm a gynecologist, I'm an obstetrician, I'm in that job because I love doing what I'm doing. But if you were to ask me to put me in the hospital all day, maybe even I might not want to do that. So for parents, it is not therapy. It is you are living the life with that child. So do take care of yourself. Do not neglect yourself. Have that me time. And very importantly, love yourself. Because only if you love yourself, when you get up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror, and the person who you see there, you need to love that person. Because when you love that person, you're going to love your child and everybody around you. And also, please, 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 do not presume incompetence. Do not presume that your child needs you all the time. You have to cut the metaphorical umbilical cord. You have to let the child grow. You have to let them go. And the day you stop tying the shoelaces for that boy, he's actually going to do it. The day you stop taking decisions for that child, he's actually going to do it. He wants to do it. Just today morning at my therapy center, there was this little boy of, I think, 4 years who was trying to walk on the parallel bars, and the mother was supporting him from behind. And I saw that he was able to hold on to one of the parallel bars because his grip was good with one hand, but the other one was very tight. He was not able to hold. She was supporting him from the back. I just did a little bit, I just did something different. I moved the mother from the back and I gave the child my finger to hold on with the hand which was very tight, with which he could not hold the parallel bar. So there was this little boy holding on to the parallel bar with one hand, holding on to my finger with the other hand, and nobody at his back. And you know what he did? He actually crossed the whole parallel bars, leaving one hand, getting scared, but trying to balance his body, taking a step forward. And by the end of it, what delighted me most was that that child was laughing because he had done it without his mother, laughing because he had done it without support. It was his achievement. So break the metaphorical cord. So parents, all therapists, and all the people with cerebral palsy out there, why fit in when you are born to stand out? You were made a parent, you were made a therapist, you were made a person with cerebral palsy because you had to do something in your life which not everyone can achieve. And I want to thank my son for that, for making me what I am. I would not have been here. I would not have been the Neelam Sodhi, which so many people recognize, if he had not shown me what my purpose in life was, what my ikigai was. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patient listening.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Neelam, for such an informative session. The chat box is filled with messages being grateful to you for sharing your story and your experience. I'm pretty sure all the attendees have learned very valuable things from you. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. We have received a lot of questions and I would like to begin with the Q&A segment soon. But before that, I would like to inform our attendees that if you would like to register for the upcoming webinars from Ability, please do check out the link in the chat box. We have 2 webinars scheduled on the 20th of March and the 24th of March. One on the role of parents, special educators, and schools in supporting children with ADHD. and also the other on how you can support children in an inclusive school. So do check out other relevant information related to these upcoming webinars. And if you're interested, please do register. If you already have an Ability account, it would just be a click of button to register for the webinar. Okay, now let's get started with the questions. The first one that we have, Dr. Neelam, is from Shobha. Shobha is saying that her child is 2.5 years old and having developmental issues due to a genetic condition called deletion. He suffers with low muscle tone. He's now sitting and doing assisted walking. So what are the ways that I can help the child for gross motor skills development? He's an early intervention since he was 5 months old. So if you could answer Shobha's question.
Yeah, I will. Shobha, you said your child is already in early intervention, which means that you have a physiotherapist who's got your back. That means that they are providing you with the programs. Now, according to me, for me, physiotherapy means active movements. It does not mean passive movements. And active movements is when the muscles are going to be used in probably play or in doing anything where the muscles are going to be used, right? So off my head, I'm just going to say that even if your child has low tone, hypotonia, well, something that I did with my son, he had hypertonia. So he had spasticity. Ring of roses is a game we all know, right? So what happens in ring of roses? You're doing side walking, you're doing walking, that is going around in a circle, you're holding hands, then you're squatting and you're jumping up. This is a single game, which if you are going to play every day, is going to give the therapy for your son to give him all the gross motor activities that he needs. This is just one. And if you think about it, I'm pretty sure you know 10 other things which you could use. You take a program from your physiotherapist, but you elaborate it, you know your child best, enjoy with him, play, and that is how his muscle tone is going to get better.
Great. Hope that answers your question, Shobha. The next one is from Maria. Maria is saying that her son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at the age of 4 months. He has been having seizures twice a month, and sometimes he does not have it. So he's 13 years old now. Maria wants to understand what is the main cause of having seizures and why is he having seizures now, like epileptic seizures. Pardon me if I pronounce it incorrectly.
That's fine, Swati. Epilepsy, people with cerebral palsy, children and adults with cerebral palsy are known to have epilepsy. So we do not necessarily know what is the reason, but there could be whatever brain damage happens. So there is a trigger there, and so epilepsy occurs. As such, because of epilepsy, life generally does tend to get disrupted. You're going to have to go to a good neurophysician and see what treatment is required. But also be sure, also one thing that you need to be mindful of, why they occur, like I told you, you might probably not find any reason. Even if your doctor has given you the EEG test, it is possible that no necessary cause has been found. So instead of looking for the cause, look for what you can do and how long that treatment needs to be taken. So one thing, also be mindful of the fact that when you give medications for epilepsy, they cause a lot of sedation. So if anybody is having that treatment, medicine, often enough our brain becomes so dull, or there is so much of sleepiness that you're not awake to do daily activities. So one thing that you could do was to talk to your doctor about the timing of the medication so that it does not interfere with your child's routine activities. That's what I have to say. Yeah.
Got it. The next one is from Charles. Charles is saying that he's studying special education and being a student and a future special education teacher. What are some of the tips that you can give to Charles, if at all, he would be handling students with cerebral palsy in future?
Okay. Charles, the first thing is the right attitude. So I think you're already on the way to becoming a good teacher, maybe also for children with disabilities, because you're asking this question. So you want to prepare yourself. Just a couple of tips that I would like to share is that something like in our case, my son has a visual problem. So he was an auditory learner. So what was going on the blackboard was not something he could relate to so much, despite the fact that he used to be sitting on the first bench. So you have a child who has a vision problem, you put them on the first bench, you see that the child is understanding what is written on the blackboard, but multiple intelligences is something you can use, knowing that there are different ways an individual learns. So please learn about, please use that, learn about that and use it. And another thing that's something which I did in my life is that with children with disabilities, they probably learn best on the concrete, and then on the pictorial, and then on abstract. So if I had to teach my child addition, my son, if I had to teach him addition, I had to put two pencils and say, okay, this is 2 and this is 2 and this makes 4. Then do it on a picture or on the paper, and then get him to do his mental maths. But because of this, his mental maths also was very sharp. So maybe, Charles, you could, and teaching concepts instead of rote learning. So those concepts have to be absolutely very strong. The foundation has to be strong. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Surely, those were quite valuable tips. Hope that helps you, Charles, and all the other special educators who are attending the session today. The next one is from Babu Rajan. Babu Rajan is asking us that he does know, and other people might also know, that cerebral palsy is due to abnormal brain development. So he wanted to understand the reason or the cause behind cerebral palsy, if it is genetic or any external influences are responsible for causing cerebral palsy.
Okay. It is due to brain injury. Okay. Brain injury before, during, or after birth. And when you say brain injury, it means that because of lack of oxygen, some parts of the tissues of the brain, some parts of the brain, they get damaged. Now, this damage is permanent, means that area of the brain is never going to recover. It's not going to reform again. But sorry, I just missed out on the question. What am I thinking? So he wants to know that, come back again, Swati. He said, what is the reason? Yeah, genetic.
Yeah, what are the causes, if it is genetic or there are any external influences for causing cerebral palsy?
There could be genetic, but that is only about 10% of the cases, or even less. Most of the times, in 80% of the times, you do not know the reason. But there are certain things which can be taken care of, is that because it is before, during, or after birth. So after birth, up till 5 years, if there is any sort of brain damage, a child falls down from the bed, or like we had a case, there was this bucket full of water in the bathroom, and the toddler was just, mother was not around. She went into the bathroom, tried to pick up that water, fell head first into the bucket, and was not able to breathe for 10 minutes or something. So although she came out, but she had cerebral palsy. So although she's surviving, but because of the lack of oxygen, that happened, or because of fever, or because of jaundice after birth, or before birth, if the mother has maybe hypertension or diabetes, or the baby is small, what we call intrauterine growth restriction. So these are, or the baby is born prematurely. So these are reasons which cannot be controlled. What can be controlled is that during the pregnancy period, the mother needs to take very good nutrition. What can be controlled is you take regular antenatal care, see to it that your blood pressure is normal, get regular checkups, see that the baby is growing well, and if there is any intervention needs to be done. If you have a history of preterm labor, if there is a history of preterm labor with any mother, then they need to take the necessary precautions so that the next baby is also not born preterm. So this is all that you can do. There is no definite cause that most of the times you can identify. Sometimes, yes, we say baby did not cry after birth, it was a long delivery process, or the shoulders got stuck, or for whatever reason, the baby did not cry. So maybe you can find a reason. Maybe you can find fever or a trauma, but most of the times, and almost 70% of the times, you will not be able to find a reason.
That definitely comes from your rich years of experience as a gynecologist and as a parent. So hope that answers your question really well, Babu Rajan. The next one is from Mary. Mary wanted to know that some researchers are now starting to state that learners with special needs should be addressed as students or learners with additional needs. So Mary wanted to know, is this the new term now? And should we use it for children with cerebral palsy?
Oh, well, in India, we are not using that term. I think it's being used in Australia, though I'm not sure. So it is not something which is universally acknowledged to be there. Uh, Whatever term you use, fact remains the same, that there is going to be an additional support needed in education, or maybe in mobility, or maybe in being independent. So one little thing that I want to say here is, see, there are certain things which are acceptable. Why internationally, use of mental retardation changed to intellectual disability, because mental retardation definitely was stigmatizing. But if I asked my son, someday this did come up, what would you prefer to be called, as a person with special needs, or as a person with disability, or as a Divyangjan? So he says a disability is a disability. How much of a difference does it make whether you address it this way or that? I do not know if it answers your question, Mary, but use the term that is used around you, the culturally valued analog. We do not use it here.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, this is, I think so. You have already addressed that in your session. It is the attitude that matters, and terms may differ from geographical locations and also from culture to culture. Moving on to the next one. This is from Raj Lakshmi. Raj Lakshmi is asking us, what type of equipments or aids might a person with cerebral palsy should use to get around and also to communicate with others? If you have any recommendations or suggestions.
Okay, there is a host of stuff available, and I think presumably Rajmi Lakshmi is in India. So depending on what is the disability, or how severe is the disability, or what part of the body is affected, like communication could be that maybe they cannot speak at all, but there could be other reasons also. So you have head pointers, you have eye tracking devices, you have computers and tablets, you have assisted devices like you have Avaz, Gupshup, Aditi, which has been made by, I think, IAM something. So there are a host of communication devices available. If you are looking for something very specific, then maybe Ability can share my email ID and you could send me a mail and I could help you out with that.
Sure. You could write to us at support@ability.com and we shall pass on your emails to our speaker and the experts to help you learn more and connect with them. Okay, so the next one is from Maria, and Maria actually has this question. If you could describe the types of cerebral palsy and what can we do to detect the condition in infants or toddlers?
Well, there are 4 types technically: the spastic type, the dyskinetic, the ataxic, and the mixed type of cerebral palsy. Although, like my husband, who's an orthopedic surgeon and he does surgeries for children with cerebral palsy, he says most of the time what he encounters is there is a mixed, so there is an overlap of the manifestations. How can you identify? Well, all parents, we all know that the child is going to, you support the child's head. Before 3 months is floppy like this, but by 3 months, the child supports the head. By 6 months, the child is sitting up with support. By a year, the child is going to crawl, and by a year, the child is going to stand up with support and maybe walk. So the milestones, the delay in milestones, the child not able to move his head, not grasping out to reach something. Isn't that what most children do? You put something within reach of the child and the child is going to reach out to pick that thing up, to hold on to it, to carry and put it in, to his mouth. If your child is not doing what you observe that other children of that age are doing, and believe me, this is an instinct. I did not know anything about cerebral palsy. My first feeling was that when I used to bathe my son, I used to feel that his legs are so tight, his arms are so tight. He was my firstborn. I didn't even know what was the difference, but I always used to have this impression that children's limbs are very soft. You can move them very easily. So that was my first instinct that I had. So there are delayed milestones. If the child is having drooling, the child is having crossing of legs. These are the red flags which help you identify that there is something wrong with the child.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Dr. Neelam. Since we are running short of time, we'll take 2 last questions for today's session. The next one is from Rita. Rita is asking, what are the challenges a cerebral palsy student faces with regards to schooling? You being a parent would know it better. So yeah, how would you like to answer?
From the time of admission. So if your child has cerebral palsy, which is visible, if he has a squint, if he's not walking, and or maybe he's not able to speak, then schooling, well, admission to school could also be a problem, despite all that we have got for about right to education here in India. I do not know where this question, which country this question is coming from. But mainly the problems will come in, first of all, the attitude of the teachers. So if the teacher is happy enough to have the child, and knows that he or she may have to use some different methods to just get across to that child. So I think 50% of the battle is won there. Schooling half done if the attitude is fine. So apart from that, it will be the teaching methods used, the accessibility of the school, getting to the school, maybe a class on the higher floor, then assessments. So taking down notes in the class. If the fine motor function is not good, then the child is not going to be able to write within the lines, or may not be able to write exactly what is happening in class. So you may not be able to know what exactly happened in class. So you would need to keep a track of that as a parent. And so when the time for assessments would come, and if the child cannot write, then maybe oral assessments are perfectly acceptable. Now, so another thing is that finding a scribe. So in the higher classes, maybe because of the writing, when the assessments come back and you get poor marks, the self-esteem, the confidence, the dignity of that child is losing. Oh, I'm capable of only so much. So you do not want it to come to that level also. So maybe finding a writer for that child to answer the exams. If orally also cannot be done so efficiently, then finding somebody else so that the person can speak and somebody can write. Toileting, moving around, finding directions would all depend on the coexisting conditions also with cerebral palsy. So mobility, the vision, the hearing, the speech, all these can affect a lot of issues in school. So it is not just one.
Got it.
And as a parent, you would need to keep 2 steps ahead of the teacher.
That's the best advice there can be. The next one is from Meda Maria. She's asking us, how is cerebral palsy related to or different from seizures or convulsive disorder?
Well, seizures, convulsive disorders can be because of a lot of things. Cerebral palsy is a neuromotor disability where it's not that every person with cerebral palsy is going to have convulsions. And it's not necessary that every person who has seizures of any sort is going to have cerebral palsy. So cerebral palsy, you're going to have difficulty in gross motor functions, that is maybe walking, maybe in sitting up, maybe in holding things. So the muscles behave differently. It's a neuromuscular disability. The nerves, the muscles are affected there in cerebral palsy. That is not in every individual who has seizures. So you cannot be comparing the two of them. Yes, they can coexist in one person.
Yeah, so that beautifully explains how they are also related but very different from one another. Thank you so much, Dr. Neelam, for such an informative session and also those very informative answers. That brings us to the end of session. But before that, I would like to inform our attendees that you could register for the upcoming webinars from Ability scheduled on 20th and 24th of March. Just check out the link in the chat box. It is being shared by our team members. Also, you could visit app.ability.com/events to know about all the upcoming workshops, our webinars scheduled from Team Ability. So do check that link out and also share your feedback about today's session. That will help us to improve further for you all. So Dr. Neelam, how did you like today's session? Any parting words that you would like to say?
Thank you, Swati, and thank you, Ability, for giving me this platform to connect. I think I did not know how this session would go, actually, but when I'm just glancing at the messages in the chat, I think that I have been able to reach out to a lot of people through your platform. I have learned from Ability also because I have attended a few sessions here and there. So I have also got an opportunity to learn. So I know that you guys are doing a wonderful, wonderful work. Thank you very much, all of you. I hope you're going to save the chat messages from me. I didn't get a chance to read them all. So
Sure, we will. Sure, we will. We will
and
save it and pass it on to you. Thank you so much for an excellent and amazing and informative session. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you at the next webinar from Ability.